Thank you very,
Yeah,
very much, Jens, for doing this for us. I see that you are actually in the office here, but that's like a special occasion where you go to the office because normally all of you guys are working from home like almost everybody else in Denmark, right?
we've been switching all our design processes to a fully virtual way of working. So that has been strange. This year I've been doing a design sprint online, and well, every time we're sort of like working with sketch out some ideas and some of the, we need to do it in a collaborative online platform.
Mhm.
But well, we manage. Actually, sometimes it can be easier to get into sort of like the design groove where you are focused and sort of like making deep work when you're sitting at home. So there can also be some benefits. It can be a little difficult sometimes to get into a good design mindset when you're in an open office space and people are talking about, oh, did you see the last soccer match and stuff like this? Uh, so we are sort of like created a way where we are doing a lot where we sort of like meet online and talk about stuff, and then we head out each of us into our own creative bubble, and then we create something, and then we jump back into a virtual meeting and show it up, show the things to each other. And it can really be actually so somehow this. If we needed to do this in an office, we needed to sort of like, well, we need to get into a meeting space and leave our normal seats, and
Yeah.
so some of the barriers for making creative collaboration can also be less.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
it's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Sure, that's very interesting to hear. So, you come from Peytz, which is a digital agency here in Copenhagen, and I've actually been coming with students to you twice before in previous semesters, but coming
Yeah.
to your offices, having field studies there, and it's been fantastic to see how you work and to see your space as well. And one of the things that has really stood out to me, and which is very relevant to where we are in the course right now, is how you use the tool of assumption mapping.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking here, take it away and tell us a little bit about what that is and how you work with it so we can learn the tool from you, please.
Okay. So if we need to dive into assumption mapping, perhaps it's a good idea to sort of like frame when would we do this. So um, design thinking is a lot about involving users when you are working, because you might have great ideas, you might be a brilliant creative, but you're working from within your own mind. So you're not you're not able to see beyond your own perspective. You're in your own way. You are the way you look at the world is shaped by your mind. So very important part of designing is actually figuring out the thing I'm designing, um, is this relevant for users? But one of the key risks when designing is actually designing stuff that doesn't really match the market or the need of the target groups that you are addressing. So there can be a big risk that you are building something that is not even relevant. So a typical standard things that come to mind would be the Segway, which has sort of been famous for a solution to a problem that wasn't existing. Yeah. So another one is, of course, does this even fit the the thing that we're planning? Does it even fit our competencies as a company? So this might be a great idea, but are we the right persons to do this? So obviously there is a room for a great car that is electric and can do amazing stuff. And everybody is looking at Apple and saying, well, they're moving into this market, and everybody's saying, oh, it'll be the iPhone all over again, and Volkswagen they should be shivering in their pants. But have Apple actually the abilities that will enable them to compete in this market? That's another thing too. A big risk when you're planning a new endeavor. And then, of course, the last part, feasibility. Can we even make money on this? So if you want to have a sustainable product, you need to underpin it with a structure of a sound business plan. And these things are not so much about, does this green button on the page catch the attention of the user? These are more about, when we are starting out, we're taking a lot of risk. We have a lot of risk in our projects. And if we don't figure out how we how we address this, then we might be heading off and going straight into design before actually figuring out, is this even a good idea? So that is sort of like a long-winded introduction to why do we do assumption map.
Mm-hmm. And what you just said there, Jens, actually fits right in with what we are discussing now in class, because you mentioned these sort of three bubbles, these three focuses that you need to have about desirability and viability and feasibility all together.
So how do we approach this part of the project? So typically we'll be in a very early part of discussions with customers. They might be really excited about that they are going to do this new thing. They have already put the revenues that they are planning to have from this idea into their budgets, and everything is set up, and they're totally focused on just do this. We just want this this app that will enable people to train in their home or whatever. Yeah. But then we sort of like try to figure out, okay, before we spend many millions of kroner on a big project, how can we figure out whether this is it likely that this is going to be a success? That is actually what we're, because if we can adjust the idea and pivot the approach early on, then we are able to actually design the right thing. Yeah. So this is all about finding all the right assumptions. So perhaps you can see here, this is sort of like a sketch of the business model canvas, so that you probably know, done by Alexander Osterwalder with a lot of his collaborators in a seminal book. All of these questions over here in the business model, these are all ideas, and you could call them assumptions or hypotheses that we are sort of like, that we are somehow, without perhaps thinking about it, we have a lot of hypotheses about how the world works, and because we have these hypotheses, in our minds, this business model is a great idea. Yeah. So that is sort of like what we're trying to get to the stage where we have very important hypotheses that we know is important to be able to say, yes, this is actually right. Because if this is not right, then we should do something else. Yeah. So this is the result of assumption mapping. In the end, we are left with a list of these hypotheses, and then we can plan how can we test them in the best way possible. Yeah. Okay. So what we're trying to do here is that I thought that we should work on an assumption map for something. Yeah. This is something that we are working on right now. We're working on with this huge international company. They want to do apps for all their gasoline stations. Yeah. So the idea here is that users would like to, when they visit the service station, they want to take out their phone, not touch anything with Corona all over. No, I just want to use my phone, and then the car wash will open on itself. And so what it's going to do now is that we are going to take a 3-minute session of assumption mapping together, and we'll just work not together, but we'll work individually. You'll put in post-its, and do you know how to put a post-it on the board?
Let me just see.
So over here we can see the sticky notes. You can just make a new one with what's it called, the letter N on your keyboard. Okay. So if you press N and then click on the mouse, then it puts in a new post-it, and then you can write on the post-it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hypotheses in the, what's it called? This is a matrix we did, and right now we're not using the matrix, we're just putting in post-it notes. But as you can see, there's a couple of hypotheses up here. And yeah, it could be more. If we were more people, we would perhaps have more angles of discovery. But let's look at a couple of things that we've got, and then let's figure out how to put them into the matrix. So this is, now we have a lot of hypotheses, but how important are these, and what is actually needed to investigate? That is what we need to figure out. So as you can see here, this matrix has sort of like, this is important stuff. Yeah. The farther north our idea goes, the more important for our business model is this plan, or this hypothesis. Yeah. So also the other axis here, the x-axis, is known. How certain or uncertain are we about this? Do we have any knowledge at all about this already, or is this totally new stuff? So over here, this is something that we already know. We don't need to worry about this. It might be really important, but it is also something that we are pretty certain about. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that hypothesis. So an example here, people have smartphones. Yeah, so that is one of Michael's. And I guess if the idea that we're going to build an app, it relies pretty heavily on smartphones. I would agree to that, but perhaps is this something that we are really concerned about? Is this something that we are really concerned about? Well, perhaps not so much. So I would say this is pretty known that people have smartphones. We know that. So as you can see, this is sort of like the way we do it. And when we do it in a group, we are sort of like having discussions. Now I'm a little, I have a little advantage here because I know the case. So, so perhaps I'm talking the most, but in a group, we would also, as a designer or as a facilitator, I would be seeking out to understand the stakeholders in this session.
Yeah, I assume that those discussions that you can have around this framework are actually very, very useful and important. I mean, it's not just the end result where they end up, it's those discussions, because you learn each other's perspectives and you get smarter and smarter together, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And then also when we're doing this with stakeholders and companies, they know stuff.